So if you remember from 2 weeks ago, the Rambam was telling us about the mechanics of how prophecy works. So I know we've been through this a few times, but just I'm going to remind us of the mechanics, how Rambam views prophecy, and when we think about it clearly, this is it's not just heavily influenced by, it's based on the Aristotelian concepts of how the brain, how thoughts worked, and so on, and how the intellect works. So his model of prophecy is deeply based on that. So exactly how the Rambam would approach this subject of prophecy if we were around today is obviously a question we'll never know the answer to. But I think it's pretty clear that he wouldn't use the same model, the Aristotelian model of the intellect, if he were alive today. He'd probably use some other scientific model to describe how prophecy works. So just to remind you, there's the world beneath the sphere of the moon, which is the known world to us. And then there's the sphere of the moon and the sphere above that and the sphere above that, all the way up to the highest sphere in which the farthest stars are embedded. And then above that, or outside of that, is nothing, well, except there's God, right? So, and remember, in Aristotelian physics, all movement has to come about because an intellect made that movement, made the decision to make that movement happen. So every time we move, it's because our mind told us to move. So he understood that all movement had to have an intellect making it happen. So the intellect making the entire world move is God. And that works through this entity called, and this is an Aristotelian entity, which was understood back then. This was understood as science. We have to remind ourselves, this was not a spiritual concept to the Rambam. This was a scientific concept, right? And the active intellect is the intellect that kind of goes down from one level to the next level, and there's an overflow from this level to the next level to the next level. And within each level, there's an intellect that's being influenced by the active intellect, and then that level, using that active intellect, influences the next one, so on and so forth, until it comes down to the sphere of the moon. And then from the sphere of the moon, that active intellect lands in our brains, right? In our intellect, right? So that piece of the active intellect is in our brain, right? So when we think, we are essentially getting those thoughts all the way from on high, all the way going back to God. Now, but human beings have something else, right? In addition to this active intellect, we have this imaginative faculty, and the imaginative faculty is the faculty in our brain that that imagines things, that forms images and forms ideas, and it gets input from all of the various inputs. So those inputs are from our senses, right? And those inputs are also from our body, from our bodily desires, inputs into that imaginative faculty, and the active intellect inputs into that imaginative faculty. And Rambam explained to us that a prophet is someone who has perfected and trained his active intellect so much that his active intellect has full and total control over his imaginative faculty. So in other words, the images that he's forming in his brain, and even the input that he's getting from other places, immediately becomes transformed into a spiritual image that's coming directly from God. And that is prophecy, okay? So that's why it requires the Navi, the prophet, to be such a perfect and highly developed individual, ethically, morally, intellectually. He or she has to develop that knowledge and that ability to the extent that he or she has complete control over that imaginative faculty. Now, and Rambam explained to us before that in theory, then a prophet, it should be automatic, right? Remember, Rambam told us that the philosophers who believed in the same concept that I just described believe that therefore, when a person reaches this level, he or she is automatically a prophet. And Rambam says that no, that's where God's choice comes in, so to speak. In other words, so where you can get to that level, you need to get to that level to be a prophet. But when you get to that level, God may or may not decide that you are a prophet. right? You may or may not receive those kinds of messages, so to speak, from God. Now, to the extent that Rambam's kind of hinted, if you remember in the past chapters, and I'm just kind of catching us up to where we're up to now, hinted that 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 the real reason why God is going to choose or not choose to give that person who's perfected his intellect is usually because that person is a selfish person. He's really not fully developed. He wants to attain knowledge because he or she wants to take advantage of others and so on. And we saw hints to that as well. So now, so then in the beginning of chapter 41, Rambam explained that so now these visions that the prophet sees in his or her imaginative faculty, I'll switch off between his and her, but instead of say both every time, that those images are dreams, right, or chazon, or visions or dreams, and that is how all prophecy is communicated. And this is going to be a very important point. And as the Rambam develops this point, we'll understand why it's so important. And this part gets more relevant to us and soon as we go through this. Because what Rambam is really trying to demonstrate now is that all of this communication with God is all in the mind. It's all imagery. It's all dreams, which in the Rambam scheme has a direct connection to God, right? Which we just described. It's not happening in the physical world. The physical world, remember, according to Rambam, always works based on the rules of science, right? Things happen. So there's no magical stuff going on around him, even when the Torah tries to present it in a way as if the prophet saw certain things happening actually in the world. Where it's really happening is in his mind, in this imaginative faculty. So now that's why he's emphasizing this, and you'll see how he develops that point. I kind of gave you a little preview, so now let's do it. All the dicta. I'm in the big paragraph on page 387 now. Remember, because I stopped recording, I'll just say for people that are watching the recording, it's part 2, chapter 41, page 387 in the Pines edition, the big paragraph. All the dicta that are formulated according to one of these forms are prophecies, and those who utter them are prophets, right? In other words, every time the Torah says, and he mentioned in the last paragraph, numerous versions of visions and prophecies and dreams, which the Torah and throughout Tanach use those terms, they're always referring to the same basic thing. And Rambam emphasized that several times, and we studied that last time together. However, in the cases when it is said God came to so-and-so in the dream of a night, b'chalom halayla, right? Dream of a night, that's different. That's something else. And you'll understand why he's saying that. For this way of speech signifies that an intimation came to that individual from God, right? No, I'm sorry, I skipped a line. There is no prophecy at all, nor is the individual in question a prophet. Sometimes the Torah will mention that a person had a dream from God, a dream of the night in which he had some message from God. Those cases, the person is not a prophet at all. All it means is that this person, just got an idea, which just so happened to be an idea which came from God. What does this mean? In addition to, it makes it clear to us that the information came to pass in a dream. It says to us that this person, he was dreaming. Whether he was daydreaming or sleeping at night is not that important, but usually we dream at night, so it's a dream of the night. For just as God causes emotion, and this is, we almost need to know his example before we understand his statement. So I'm going to jump ahead to the second part of this paragraph, where Rambam is going to tell us the examples of Lavan, right? Where God appeared, or Avimelech. So let's use the example of Avimelech. Avimelech was the king of the Philistines. Remember the story where Abraham came to the land of Avimelech, and he told everyone that his wife is really his sister. And then Avimelech took Sarah into his house and almost slept with her. And then Avimelech had this dream that she's really, he should give her back to Avram because he's really the wife. So now, and so what is it that Avimelech heard or saw in a dream if Avimelech didn't go through all that work of being a prophet? He's certainly not that kind of a person. Why is it? What exactly happened? So that's what Rambam is explaining now. For just as God, that's the line that I'm up to, causes emotion of the individual in question with a view to another individual's being saved or is perishing, and I'm going to go back to the sentence in a minute, he also causes by means of the vision of a dream the creation in time of things that he wishes to be so created. Now that sentence has a lot in it, so I want to describe what that sentence means, at least what I think it means. And that is that we all live in a world in which our actions have effects on other people, right? And God set up the world in such a way, and the Rav Kapach in the Hebrew version that I like to use um, refers you to look at one of the Rambam's introductions to the Mishnah, where he talks about how the world is set up in such a way where my actions have effects on you, and often in a beneficial way, but unfortunately sometimes in a not beneficial way. So I go about my life, whatever it is that you do in your life, regardless, right? But let's say, I'm a physician, so I go about my life, right? Mostly because I need to earn a living, right? And I want to pay my bills, right? But the result is that someone else has an effect on her life, right? Because she gets the treatment that she needed, and so on. So God set the world up in such a way that our actions and sometimes our thoughts have an effect on the way we interact with others, and that's how the world kind of interacts. So even though, right? So it's almost like I or you or anyone here or anyone in the world is acting as an agent of God, even though they're not having prophecies. So the same thing when it says that Avimelech realized, right, that he should give her back, right? Something came to his mind that he recognized that my actions have a relationship, my actions have an effect on someone else. And somehow, right, that message was communicated to him that he realized, you know what, I should bring her back to Avram. There's something wrong here. Something's not right. Whether it's something that he sensed or something that he felt, but the Torah translates it and tells it to us as if God appeared to him in a vision and told him ABC. But what really happened was in his mind, he had that realization and then he went and acted upon it. So, and why is it that way? Why do I think that he's not actually a prophet, right? So what this should tell you, and we're going to see later, is that all of us really have a little bit of prophecy then, right? If this is true, right? Because we all sometimes have intuition. Sometimes you walk into a room and you just, the guy in the corner, there's something wrong. I don't know what it is. I mean, he's smiling, but there's something wrong. I should go and say hi and ask him how he's doing and if he needs any help, right? You just see it, and it's not. We didn't have a vision from God, but you just know, And Rambam already told us. Remember that that's really the first level of prophecy is intuition. And that's really what's going on here. So for we do not doubt that Lavan, the Aramean, was a perfectly impious man and an idolater. As for Avimelech, though he was righteous in comparison with the other people in his land, but Abraham said that surely the fear of God is not in this place. He was referring to the whole land of the Philistines. So even Avimelech, who may have been a better person, because you see that he did hold back in the beginning from sleeping with Sarah, and he did give her back. So the Torah doesn't present him as such a terrible guy, but that was in relation to his people. But Abraham had already stated that he was afraid of him too, for good reason, because he did take her, right? But God came to Avimelech in a dream of the night, and it says in the Lavan in the dream of the night. So know this and consider the difference between the dictum of Scripture when it says God came, God spoke, and when it says in a dream of the night or in the visions of the night, right? So by Yaakov, it said God spoke to Israel, meaning Yaakov, Israel, in the visions of the night. But by Lavan and Avimelech, it says, right, but God came and so on in a dream of the night. So, which is translated by Onkelos, and that's Rambam's favorite translator is Onkelos, right? He's praised him many times. A word came from the Lord. He doesn't say the Lord revealed himself, right? Just said a word came, right? Because remember, all of our thoughts on some level, right, come from above. That's where thoughts come from, right? But in our minds, right, it's just somehow you just got it, right? And Avimelech got it, and then Lavan got it, right? Got that message. Although so-and-so was not a prophet and prophetic revelation had never come to him, but he was merely told the things in question. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped a line. Know that, okay, so that's that point. That's how he dismisses the Lavan and Avimelech problem. He has other problems, right? Other prophets that don't seem to fit this 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 way of thought. Other prophets, other times God appears to people like Hagar and others, which he's going to deal with soon. But this is how he deals with the Lavan and which is, I think, Avimelech idea that and they're lying in bed at night and they realize this is not right. Something is wrong, right? This woman, she's not a sister. Lavan realizes, Yaakov left. There's something wrong here. I got to do something. And that's what it means that God gave him a message. Okay, so know that it sometimes says, and Lord spoke to so and so, even though so and so was not a prophet, right? So, and prophetic revelation had never come to him, but he was merely told things questioned by a prophet, right? So the example Rambam uses for that is when it says by Rivka, by Rebecca, it says that the children were fighting in her belly, and she was very uncomfortable from the movement, from all the twins jumping around in there. So it says Vatelech lidrosh et Hashem, that she went to inquire of the Lord. And the Chachamim explain, the sages say, and we're on the top of page 388 now, that to the school of Aver, that she went to the authorities, right? She went to the scholars of the day, which was in the rabbinic mind the school of Aver, right? And the school gave her an answer, and then with that reference to that event, it says the Lord said to her, even though. So in other words, Chazal were trying to tell us, what does it mean she went to find out what it was that God had to say, what was the advice. So he found out that what it means is that she went to the wise people, the people that had more closer access to this wisdom, in order to tell her what was going on. And even though it has been said that the expression "and the Lord said unto her" means that it was done through an angel, what does it mean? It means because Aver was an angel, like we're about to explain. A prophet is sometimes called an angel. As you notice, sometimes I might paraphrase a little just to get through the thought a little quicker. Or else this explanation alludes to the angel who came to Aver. If it says that an angel spoke to her, it means because Aver got this through an angel. Remember, don't think every time we see the word angel, a person with white wings fluttering around in the sky. An angel, according to Rambam, he explained to us very clearly, the angels are those intellects, right, which exist and run those and make those spheres above us move, right? That's what an angel is. An angel is the conduit by which the active intellect overflows from level to level to level until it comes down to us, right? That's what an angel is. So when Rambam says an angel spoke to Aver, it means that Aver accessed his wisdom. He accessed what was in his own wise mind and gave her advice, and that advice was coming from God. So that concludes chapter 41. I'll stop for a moment if anyone has questions, and then we can go. We can go on to 42. But any comments or questions so far?
I have one.
Mhm.
Sounded like I think that when we sleep, we dream sometimes. We dream fantastic things.
Mhm. Yep.
Is the assertion in this chapter that this is one of the modes that God communicates with a prophet? Is that correct?
Definitely, yes. Those kinds of dreams, yeah, are communications. So now our dreams are typically just a bunch of gibberish and nonsense. But a
Mhm.
prophet who has so much control over his or her imaginative faculty, they will be getting images, and he's very soon going to actually go into those details, and mostly in chapter 43, he's going to talk about the kinds of things that they see in dreams. So for you and I, we might see gibberish, which may have some meaning here and there. It usually does have some meaning if we really analyzed it. But the prophets see parables that actually have much deeper meaning. You could probably think of some examples right away on your own, but when we'll get there. In 43, he's going to talk about dreams in more detail. So let's hold off for that.
We we
Go
have
ahead.
we have a modern, I guess maybe Freud instituted this. I'm not sure. We have a subconscious mind that works. I guess is there any connection between
I
Is
don't know. I'm not sure how to compare. I'm sure somebody's probably done a written article or studied this to compare the Rambam's uh, cognitive model to more modern ones, and how what correlates with what. But I don't know. I don't think I have a good enough handle on modern psychology to talk about that. I mean, I remember Freud. I read him in college, and maybe here and there, but I'm far from an expert.
yeah, okay. It
So
did the last
yeah,
thing that I wanted to know is it says to the school of Aver.
right.
Uh, can you elaborate on that or what that is?
Well, okay. In I don't know if to call it in the mythology, but in the history of that Chazal had of the world, right? That started with Adam, um, and Chazal have this view that in every generation, from all the way from Adam to Noah, and then Noah to Abraham, there was always somebody. There was a school that always was faithful to God and had access to wisdom. Maybe not Torah as we would see it today, but was faithful to God, and that those are the figures mentioned in the Torah. So and so had so and so as a son, and then so and so had so and so as a son. That is really a lineage of the knowledge of God going from Adam all the way down to Abraham, right? So, however, in Abraham's father Terach kind of went off the way, and then Abraham brought it back. So now, in the times of Rivka, so Aver, Shem va'Aver, right? So remember, a was goes that he's one of the early. So was established is the son of Shem. Going all the way back, Shem, the son of Noah, right? So the school was known as the school of Shem and Aver, right? And because they taught the next generation, which taught the next generation, so it was known as the school of Aver, right? So there were wise men back then for her to access and find what God's knowledge was and God's wisdom was. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I mean the Torah itself doesn't say that, but that's how Chazal viewed the history. Okay. So when they were looking to say, well, where did Rivka go? Oh, she must have went to Aver school. So they were hanging around. They had a branch near where she lived. um, but okay. So chapter 42. So we have explained that wherever it is mentioned that an angel was seen or had spoken. So this chapter is actually well, let's do it. It's very very important one. Um, and also a source of significant controversy as well. So those are always fun. Okay, so we have explained that wherever it is mentioned that an angel was seen or had spoken, that this has happened only in a vision of prophecy or in a dream, whether this is explicitly stated or not, as has been said before. Now it might not sound so bold, but read it again and then you'll see how bold it is. Because what the Rambam is saying is that every time it says, right, that a prophet saw XYZ occurring, right, it was a dream, not something happening. In other words, he was seeing it in a vision. So now start thinking in your mind of your favorite prophecy where a prophet envisions something happening. The Rambam said a very bold statement wherever it is mentioned. So the first thing comes to my mind right now is Ezekiel, Yechezkel, and the Valley of the Bones, right? So the question then becomes the verses are presented as if Yechezkel stood up and saw this valley full of bones, and then he saw all this happening in front of him. That's how it's presented. Rambam is telling us clearly these guys. If that was what happened, right, then that would have meant that a completely out of natural bounds occurrence would have occurred. This incredible miracle would have occurred that these bones would have come to life, right? But you can think about this on any. That's one of the most dramatic visions in the Bible, right? But I'm just thinking anytime there's a vision, right? So in the Rambam is telling us that it's a vision, right? I use the word vision because I'm Maimonidean influenced. But anytime there's a prophecy where it says the prophet saw something, no matter how realistically it's depicted in the Torah, right, or in the prophets or wherever, right? It doesn't mean that it actually occurred. It doesn't mean that he stood on a mountaintop and saw this happening. It means that he or she imagined it happening in their mind, and it was a dream or a vision. So know this and understand it thoroughly. Rambam wants to emphasize, even though I know that that might sound dramatic, because now when you're going to start to go through all the different ramifications of this, some of them might be striking to you, and he's going to go through some in a minute. And there is no difference between a statement in which the prophet literally affirms from the first that he saw an angel, and a statement according to whose external sense the prophet at first thought that a human individual had appeared to him. It may have been that the prophet himself didn't know what he's seeing, is really what he's saying right now. It may have been that the prophet thought he saw a person walking by saying something, right? And then eventually realized that no, this wasn't him actually seeing that person. It was actually a vision, right? Right? So, whereas at the end it became clear to him that it was an angel. So, regardless of how the verses present it, the verses may present it the way it presented. It may very well be that Yechezkel thought he was seeing bones, but at some point he realized, no, this is a prophecy, right? In other words, it's so real to him that he may actually have thought that he was seeing people or bones, right, or whatever your favorite prophecy may be. For inasmuch as you find in the course of the event that he who has seen, remember, this is so important for the Rambam's philosophy because otherwise you'd be required to say that tons and tons of really wild miracles are occurring all around the Bible, right? And Rambam doesn't like that kind of. He doesn't like miracles. We've seen this already. He thinks everything works when God works in this world. He works by nature. He works through the rules of physics, right? So so for inasmuch as you find that he who was seen and had spoken was an angel, you ought to know it doesn't mean that there's a being called an angel that stood in front of him and talked to him, but it means you ought to know and to establish as true that the event was from the first a vision of prophecy or a dream of prophecy. There was no guy standing in front of Joshua, and he's going to use that example in a minute, telling him, giving him a message. No, Joshua thought he saw a man, but then realized that he was seeing a vision of prophecy. For in a vision of prophecy or a dream of prophecy, the prophet sometimes sees God speaking to him. The prophet may even envision God speaking to him. Does it mean that God came down and talked to him? Of course not. It means that that's the vision that he had, right? So, as we explained, and sometimes an angel speaking to him. Just think about how important this is theologically. I mean, there's an entire religion that the largest religion on the planet that believes in the opposite of this, right? And Rambam is it's inconceivable that such a thing could be, right? You don't see angels, you don't see, certainly not gods walking on this world, right? It's completely inconceivable to Rambam that such a thing can happen, right? If you did get a message of prophecy, then it was in the form of a vision, and that's it, right? But not that's it, but that's the significance of the vision, right? Sometimes he hears somebody speaking to him without seeing an individual who is speaking, right? Sometimes he may hear someone speaking without actually seeing someone. He may hear a voice, right? That might be how, again, sometimes he sees a human who is speaking. Sometimes he sees a human who speaks to him, and afterwards it becomes clear that that was not really a human, it was really an angel. And remember what the interpretation of an angel is, according to Rambam. The problem is that every time we see the word angel, our brains are so wired by Disney that we think of flying angels. But we gotta change our brain to be wired that when we see an angel, the word angel, we think about the intellects of the spheres that are talking to us. It means something completely different, right? Thus, in this kind of prophecy, the prophet mentions that when he saw a man who acted or spoke, and that afterwards he knew that he was an angel. So, and then the Rambam quotes from Rabbi Chia Hagadol, right? Rabbi Chia the Great, So, the Rabbi Chia was one of the great Amoraim, was one of the great rabbis from the Amorite period. So Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, right, was known as Rebbe, was the writer and compiler of the Mishnah. So that would be, I don't know, please forgive me if I'm wrong, somewhere around the year 120 CE, maybe, give or take 20 years or so, I think. And his students, and that ended the period known as the Mishnaic period, right? And then his student was Rabbi Chia Hagadol, Rabbi Chia the Great. And he was known as the beginning of the Amoraic period, where the Talmud, the Gemara, was written on the Mishnah, right? So that's why Rabbi Chia was known as Rabbi Chia Agadol. So one of the sages, in fact, a great man among them, and it wasn't just one, it was arrived at this capital principle, is Rabbi Chia the Great. He explained that one of the most famous stories of angels appearing as men, I'm probably all three of people, when I tell angels appearing as men, you think right away of the story of the three angels who appeared to Abraham, right? They came to give him the message that Sarah was going to have a son, right? So, and he was sitting in the front of the tent, sick and in the sun, and all of a sudden, these three men appeared, right? So, and it said over there. So Rabbi Chia was able to look at that parsha, right, at that verse, and realize what was going on over here. Because remember, it started off by saying, "Vayera elav Adonai," and God appeared to him be'elonei mamre. In Elonei Mamre, that's the place where he was. V'hu yoshev pesach ha'ol, and he was sitting in the front of the tent. So it starts off by telling us that this is a vision, right? This is a vision coming from God. Vayisa einav vayar, and he raised his eyes and he saw, and there's three men approaching him. Vayar, and he sees them, vayaretz l'krosam, and he ran to greet them. So the Rambam is telling us that all of this is a vision, right? Abraham is sitting and he's having a vision, right? Because God appeared to him. And in his vision, he saw three men, and in his vision, he ran to greet them, and so on. So, for after he had first propounded the proposition that God manifests himself to him, Rabbi Chia, as he was studying this chapter from the Torah, Rabbi Chia looked and he said, hey, it says over here that God appeared to him, right? And then he began to explain what the form of this manifestation was. What does it mean that God appeared to him? And Rambam would explain to us what that means, and he told us what that means, right? That in a vision. And he said that at first he saw three men and ran, whereupon they spoke and were spoken to. So he who propounded this allegoric interpretation says of Abraham's dictum, right? So in other words, right? So Rabbi Chia is explaining, and this is in the Medrash in Breshit Rabbah, right? That all of this is part of the vision of God appearing to him, right? So now, so then you don't have to wonder, like when you learn it as, I don't know, I remember learning this as a child, thinking about angels taking the form of human beings, and the people are walking around, they're really angels, and then you start asking, well, how did they eat? Abraham gave him meat. If they're angels, the angels eat. Well, did they really eat? Maybe they pretended to eat. So all of this is nonsense. Those questions and issues, according to Rambam, are nonsense. Such things don't happen, right? If there was people coming, there would have been people, but there weren't. Rambam tells us this entire story is a vision, right? So and then and you can see further. He who propounded this allegoric says of Rambam's dictum, when it says later, my Lord, if I now have found favor in thy sight, pass not away, I pray thee, from thy servant, is Avram reiterating that this vision should continue. He's saying to God, I'm in this vision, right? Stay with me, right? Which is a proof that everything intervening between those two statements of the Torah was also a vision. That it too is a description of what he said in a vision of prophecy to one of them. He says, in fact, he said it to the greatest among them. So that entire conversation that Avram had with these angels is a conversation he had in a dream. Understand this story too, for it is one of the secrets, Rambam says. So when Rambam tells us about secrets that he's telling us, secrets that he's not telling us, this is the kind of secrets that he's talking about. He just told us a secret, right? That this is how you can read this story and not have to wonder about all these weird stuff about angels walking around, right? And Rambam is telling you the secret is, it's a vision, right? And I say likewise the story of Yaakov, where he wrestled a man, right? And they wrestled a man with him. And it is in conformity with the form of prophetic revelation. It's the same thing. Did actually an angel come and have a wrestling match? No. Jacob was in the dark. He was on the other side of the river from the family, and he had this vision of this wrestling, and he had this emotional and intellectual wrestling match, right? With in his mind, struggling with this terrible struggle here. On the one hand, he's being faithful to God. On the other hand, and he's been so successful. On the other hand, his brother's coming to kill him. He put his family on the other side. Now he's alone. Does he run? Does he go? Does he come? What does he do? He has this terrible crisis in his mind, and in the form of an angel, he wrestles with it and wins, and moves on and confronts his brother. Right. So all of a sudden, there's no wrestling match. Right. Nobody's beating anyone up. It's a vision. It becomes an intellectual process. So this is in conformity with the form of prophetic revelation, and as much as it's finally made clear that he was an angel, after telling us about fighting with this man, the Torah makes it clear that this was actually an angel. And remember what an angel is according to Rambam. Angel is that which talks to us in our minds, in our hearts, in our souls. This is quite similar to the story concerning Abraham, right? Where it says, and the Lord appeared to him, and then begins to explain the same thing like we said before with the story of the three men, the three visitors. It is similar with regard to Jacob. At first it says, and the angels of God met him. Then it begins to explain what happened before they met him. And sorry, my cat keeps jumping in on my lap. But then it begins to explain what happened before they met him, and says that he sent messengers and acted and did this and that, and so on. We don't have to go into this story, the basic idea. And then Jacob was left alone, and so on. So all of this was just a vision. And these are the angels of God, of whom it has been said at first, and the angels of God met him. All the wrestling and conversation and question happened in a vision of prophecy. Okay, I said that many times. So then and the Rambam also uses this to explain the story of Bilam's donkey, right? The famous talking donkey. So, and likewise, the whole story of Bilam on the way and of the she-ass speaking, all of this happened in a vision of prophecy. As it is finally made clear that an angel of the Lord spoke to him. If you look at the story carefully, you see when the donkey spoke and an angel talked. What does that mean? He was having a vision. Did a donkey actually start talking? No, right? But he saw in a vision. And it's really powerful, because you can see coming up in the heart of Bilam at the time, what would the donkey say, right? And in an honest moment, in a short honest moment, the donkey would say, why are you hitting me? I'm a good donkey. I've been serving you really well. Sometimes we can almost hear if we, God forbid, we treat someone poorly, whether it's a human or an animal, right? And then we wake up and realize, like what if that person was going to tell me what he or she really thinks? And we realize, oh my goodness, the person would say, and we look at it from their perspective. And that's a bit of prophecy. And we think, my gosh, what he would say, why do you treat me like this? Why are you acting this way to me? So that's the vision of prophecy. Did he actually have to open his mouth to convey that message? No. Bilam had to have that moment, right? Similarly, I shall say with regard to what Joshua said, when he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, there stood a man, right? That this happened in a vision of prophecy. That story of Joshua is also a fascinating one. At 5:13, I'm just going to pull it up so I can read it here. Sorry. This was it was right before Jericho, right before the Battle of Jericho. So he's standing at the cusp of an extremely challenging and an extremely difficult time. Is he going to be successful? He's putting all of the people he's leading in this tremendous amount of danger in order to conquer the land of Israel. So he's alone at night, right? He was in Jericho. And he lifts his eyes, and he sees and there's a man standing opposite him. And his sword is in his hand. So imagine the mind of Yoshua. He envisions a man with a sword coming at him. He knows he's walking into battle. He's about to go into battle. This is the kind of vision a person you'd expect to have, right? Vayelech Yoshua Elav, right? And then Yeshua goes to him, Vayomer lo halanu ata im. Are you with us? You're holding a sword. Are you one of my soldiers? Should I be happy that I'm seeing you? Or are you coming against us? You're one of the enemies, right? I mean, just try to go through Yeshua's mind. Once you make this into a vision, rather than it's the product of the prophet's own mind, right? it becomes a whole different story than when he's actually seeing a person, right? And then he says, "No, Loki, Ani Sartzo Hashem, I am the Lord of the general of God's army, right? I have come now." And Yeshua fell in front of his face, and so on. We can read the story in Yeshua, the 5th chapter. It's a really beautiful one. So but and so on and so forth. I'm gonna skip a couple of lines. So the sages have already literally stated that the angel of the Lord mentioned here was Pinchas, right? Who was the one showing up? It was Pinchas, right? So why did the sages have to give an identity to this angel, right? Because we have already explained. I'm on top of page 390 now, that the term angel is equivocal, right? The term angel just is the word malach. It's really the Hebrew word that means messenger, right? So it could mean different things at different times. Sometimes malach is referring to an angel, meaning the intellects and the spheres and all that stuff that we're talking about. Sometimes an angel just means a prophet, a person who's coming to deliver a message of God. It also, and you see that Beferish, it says in Chagai, it calls Chagai, the prophet, it calls him a malach. So it explicitly refers to him in that way. And it says they mock the angels of God. That's in Divrei Hayamim, where it refers to the people mocking God's prophets and calls them the angels of God. As for what Daniel says, even the man Gabriel, right? All this happened, right? So Daniel also again describes, and I don't have to go through all the details of every prophecy, but the same idea that when Daniel said that he saw the angel Gabriel, and being caused to fly swiftly and approach me and so on, all this, it was a vision that Daniel had, right? It should by no means occur to your thought that an angel can be seen. Never think that there's anyone that actually sees angels. Let that sink in for a minute, right? If anybody comes to you and tells you that, oh, that guy or that thing, that it was an angel, I mean, it depends what he means. If he means that your experience and your encounter with that person brought your mind to think a thought, a holy special thought, something that was meaningful and important, then the person might be an angel in the sense that it brought your mind, it brought to a higher level, right? And it made you into a better person. But if you actually think that that person is actually some kind of a spiritual being, in some kind of weird miraculous way, according to Rambam, that's complete and total nonsense. Okay, so it should by no means occur to your thought that such a thing could be, that an angel can be seen, that an angel can be heard. If somebody, I hear voices, I hear angels speaking to me, nonsense, complete and total nonsense, according to Rambam. It could be in a vision of prophecy or in a dream of prophecy. But if I tell you that I was meditating and I had thoughts, that I heard messages, if what you mean is, and you felt those messages coming from God, oh yeah, that definitely, we all have access to that, right? But if you really think there's some kind of angel talking to you, then you got some serious issues, right? So according to what is stated as a principle, I do make myself known unto him in a vision. I do speak with him in a dream. That's how I talk to you, through your mind, through your intellect, through your heart, through your soul. You can draw inferences from what I have mentioned as to what remains of the things that I have not mentioned. In other words, I started your mind. Now take these thoughts and on your own and think where you can apply them in your life and what they mean. From what we have set forth before regarding the necessity of preparation for prophecy, and from what we have mentioned regarding the equivocality. So there's one other thing. So Rambam is going to kind of throw this in. It's not totally clear exactly what he means, what he's about to say, but we'll try our best to figure what he means. So there's other places too. Remember, he talked to us about Avimelech and Lavan, who heard messages that they realized that they should act in a certain way. They realized something about someone else. It's a way but there's two other stories where Hagar, the Egyptian, who right, she was banished from Abraham, from Avram's household with her son Ishmael, right, and she heard an angel telling her, right, that there's a well of water and so on. So, and then Manoach and his wife, those were the parents of Shimshon, of Samson, right? So, and they also saw this angel who told them, that they're going to have a son, etc. So the words that they heard or that occurred to their mind were similar to the voices. The Hebrew term used in the Hebrew translation is a bat kol. Now, if anyone that studied Talmud a bit, you come across every once in a while this concept of a bat kol, which is translated as some sort of a heavenly voice, right? And the Rambam obviously doesn't really believe that they actually heard a voice from heaven, right? He just told us in the last paragraph that that's nonsense, right? So what does it mean? It means what, just like what the sages constantly mention, this idea of a bat kol. And what does it mean? It's an intellectual realization, right, of an idea, right, that comes from, ultimately that comes from God. It's something that we all have access to, even Hagar, even Manoach and his wife, that aren't particularly presented as righteous or good people, right? They're just, this is a state that accompanies an individual who is not prepared for prophecy. So you're not fully prepared for prophecy, so you don't really get like a real clear vision like a prophet would get, but you can get a message, a voice, a something, right? Sometimes we'll be in a certain situation, and it'll just pop into our mind, and we'll realize, this is what I should do, right? That's how Rambam will explain a bat kol. It is only the equivocality of the term that occasions errors as to this, because the term can be used in different contexts, right? So people confuse and think that they were hearing actual prophecies, but they weren't actually hearing prophecies. This being the principle that removes most of the difficulties found in the Torah. Remember, the Rambam wrote this book for the perplexed among us. We see things in the Torah that seem to be saying something else, and Rambam told us, remember the equivocality of the terms. Sometimes one term can be used in different contexts and mean different things depending on the context. Over here, that's what it means. Consider the dictum, and the angel of the Lord found her by a fountain of water, and so on, together with a similar expression about Yosef, and a certain man found him, and all the midrashim state that he was an angel, right? So exactly what he means here is probably to say that in that particular case, the angel is just considered a messenger of God, in the sense that God set up the world so that this person would lead Joseph in a certain direction, because that's how the world works, right? What all of our actions affect other people. So that would conclude chapter 42, a very important one. Now, this idea, by the way, that all of these visions of prophecy are just visions, right, and they didn't actually happen, as you can imagine, raised a lot of controversy among the traditionalists, who did not agree with Rambam on this. And I'm not here to take sides. We're here learning the Rambam, so we're learning what he has to teach. In other classes, you can learn what the other philosophers have to teach and how they approach this. But that's that. I think it makes sense to start 43 with God's help next time. We're getting really close to the end of chapter 2, but part 2. But I am gonna. It will be next week. I will teach. But then after that, I'm going to be gone for several weeks in Germany on an army mission. So, but anyway, any questions before we close up today?
I do have a question.
Sure, please.
So, the concept of an angel as a separate being is he totally he's totally against that. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct.
So why did we why did such an thing arise to begin with? I mean,
first of all, remember that many thinkers didn't like what the Rambam said and didn't agree with him. And if you look at the literal reading of many of these paragraphs in the Torah or in the Nevi'im, it certainly sounds like there are angels, right?
Yes.
I mean, obviously, the Kabbalists, the mystics, believe in angels, right? But not just them. I mean, the Gemara, Chazal are full of references to angels of all various sorts and types, and on the surface, one would assume that they're talking about these spiritual beings, and how you explain them, everyone has their own explanation. Rambam, it has very unequivocally stated that it doesn't actually mean what it sounds like it means on the surface. It means something else, and every time, but either the Torah or Chazal talk about angels, or any of these spiritual beings for that matter. Rambam, he didn't say it here, but demons and all that stuff. Rambam says it's complete nonsense. Demons is the bad stuff that happens, illnesses. We'll get to that part later. I think in book 3 somewhere he'll mention that. But It's all nonsense. To think that there's actually angels and demons floating around, according to Rambam, is completely ridiculous.
Okay,
But
let me
yeah,
ask
go
you
ahead.
a related, maybe a related question. When we see the phrase "the Lord of Hosts" in many contexts, what is the host that
The spheres in the heaven.
the what?
According to Rambam, it's the spheres. The Tzavah Shemayim is the host of the heaven of the spheres, the Aristotelian spheres that rotate around. What he would say today, nowadays, knowing that there's no such thing as spheres, probably the stars, the moon, the planets, you know.
Okay, so
But that's my assumption. I
okay,
don't know if I'm right.
all right. I just was wondering because we see that phrase often in the prayer book, for instance.
Yeah,
Uh,
so if in Rambam's scheme, that's very important, right? Because God is the ultimate mover that makes all the spheres move, right? And it's the overflow from God to the upper sphere, to the next lower, to the next lower, to the next lower, all the way down to us, right? So calling God the Lord of hosts is basically calling him the one that ultimately controls all this stuff, right?
okay, it's not
So,
like
sorry, go ahead.
oh, go ahead. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, but that's definitely how Rambam understands that phrase.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any Any other questions, comments, observations? If not, we'll call it a close for this week. Thank you so much for joining me again, and looking forward to next week. All
Thank
right,
you.
Thank you, so.
you're welcome. Bye bye.